Hi, everybody. Welcome to Unpacking the 2023 Legal Trends Report. This is the most fun you'll have doing both statistics and getting CLE credit. I'm Joshua Lenon. I'm the lawyer in residence at Clio. Yes, that's a made-up job title. I'm an attorney, made it into New York, and this conference actually coincides with my 11th anniversary working at Clio. I often describe my job as translating the needs of lawyers and law firms to a technology company, but then I get these special instances where I get to do the reverse, and I get to translate technology back to my colleagues in the legal profession. And that's what we're doing today. So thank you so much for joining us. I do have to call out a couple of people that are just A, amazing, and B, crucial to creating the Legal Trends Report. These 14 people have worked year-round to create the information that you're going to see before you. They work tirelessly, asking questions, formulating hypotheses, reviewing copy, data, and more to make this the most rigorously tested Legal Trends Report that we've ever published. There's one other thing I should mention, is that internally as a team, we call the Legal Trends Report LTR. So when I inevitably say that in today's presentation, please note, I'm talking about the Trends Report. So what is this year's Legal Trends Report? Well, quite frankly, there's more than I can discuss in an hour. So I'd like to focus on these 5 key points. The first, an introduction to Clio's Legal Trends Report. How many people have actually read a previous version? Can I see any hands? I see some. The bright lights are making it hard to see all of them. We're going to go back through some past data and talk about why it's particularly relevant to the 2023 report. Then we're going to move into the state of the legal industry. What is the data telling us? And then I'm going to teach you about lockup, that new metric that we're launching this year. Finally, we're going to move to levers to improve your performance. Key features in Clio that you can start using today to really supercharge your law firms. And then lastly, applying artificial intelligence to the practice of law. Let's jump into that first section, an introduction to Clio's Legal Trends Report. The 2023 LTR does not exist in a vacuum. It builds on years of previous research. This is our 8th annual edition. And each edition, we've asked a question or tried to find answers to how the practice of law is really being performed. And we're able to do that because of our source of data. We use 2 particular sources of data in the 2023 Legal Trends Report. We use Clio's app data, which is the aggregated and anonymized data contributed by tens of thousands of law firms across the United States. And data often raises more questions than answers, so we supplement that with surveys of legal professionals, so they're both lawyers and non-lawyer legal professionals, and consumers of legal services, those who have hired or plan to hire a lawyer in the future. I want to focus on that first set, though, Clio app data. So this app data is actually derived from our cloud-based software. And everybody now knows what cloud-based means. You're using servers on the other side of the internet to process and store information. In Clio's case, it's Clio Grow and Clio Manage, and that data feeds into the Legal Trends Report. But I want to stress that this data is usage data, how you're using the software. It's not your client files. And I want to give you an example. Say we look at hourly billing. It could be as low as $20 an hour. It could be as high as $2,000 an hour. I can't tell you which lawyer is charging which rate in Clio, nor to which client are they charging that rate. But between those 2 extremes, I can actually see a bell curve of all the hourly rates that you have set in Clio. And we need to have that visibility so we can make sure that our calculations on your invoices are accurate. But while I can't tell you what lawyer is charging that rate, it does then let me tell you what is the average hourly rate for a lawyer's legal service in North America right now. That's $327 per hour. And if I combine that data with just one other piece of data, location, suddenly I know the average hourly billing amount per lawyer, per state, across the entire United States. You can see your state right here. I add one more bit of data, the cost of living per state, and I can tell you which state has an hourly billing amount that stretches further. Living and billing in Wyoming is like actually getting a $20 per hour raise, according to this data right here, which is pretty amazing. Let's add one more bit of data. Practice area. Suddenly, I can tell you what is the average hourly rate, not just for a lawyer in your state, but for a family law lawyer, an appellate lawyer, a criminal defense lawyer. All of this information is being derived in Clio. And in fact, when you download the latest version of the LTR, all of this information is in the appendix in the back. But I can determine all of this information without ever looking at a case file. That's the power of the data that we're all contributing and collaborating on a legal trends report. When I started practicing law way back in like the early 2000s, I didn't have access to anything like this. When I went to set my hourly rate, the best resource I had was asking a couple lawyers that I happened to know and hope that they actually knew what they were talking about when they figured out their hourly rate. I was lost. And so now we have information where we can really take a look at what our lawyers doing, how are they doing it, and move forward as a collective whole, an industry. As an aside, I actually get to research a ton of fun facts that don't end up in the legal trends report. And here's one I want to share with you right now. In the last 30 days, 12 million documents have been uploaded to Clio. 49% of them, about 5 million of those, are PDFs. 130,000 of those are WordPerfect files. Anybody still use WordPerfect in the room? I love WordPerfect, so I'm always happy to see it in Clio. But it's hanging on. And that's the power of this type of data, is we can really see these trends across huge, big data sets and pick out really interesting facts. So what have we published from these interesting facts? In 2016, we took our first look at key performance indicators, and we're going to go into this in depth a little bit more. But quite frankly, this was a bombshell. Surveys from big law firms told us that they were billing about 6 hours a day. When we looked at actual data, what we found out is that most lawyers were billing less than that, dramatically less than that. Only 28% of their day was being spent on billable work. When you go through the cuts of realization rate and collection rate, what we found is that most lawyers were only actually getting paid for about 18% of their day. And that was the lawyer funnel that we published back in 2016. Out of an 8-hour workday, lawyers were only billing about 2.2 hours. They were only realizing 1.8 hours, and they were only getting paid for an hour and a half. Lawyers worked too hard to only get paid for an hour and a half each day. So in 2017, we really tried to figure out where those missing 6 hours were going. And what lawyers told us, and what we questioned was, is there just not enough work? Or are you spending too much time on non-billable administrative tasks? And lawyers told us it's a mix of both, to be perfectly honest. They're spending about 48% of their non-billable time, so about 3 hours a day in this survey, on tasks like office administration, generating and sending bills, handling collections, and they were spending about 1/3 of their non-billable time on business development. Now, all of these are crucial things that need to get done to run a law firm, but is it the best use of lawyer time? That's what we started digging into. And in 2019, we took a look at the first data-driven longitudinal study for law firms that had ever been done. We looked at 5 years of data, and we identified law firms that were growing, stable, and shrinking. Growing firms increased their revenue at twice the rate as bringing in new clients and 3 times the rate that they're bringing in new lawyers. It's not new clients and leveraging junior associates that made these law firms grow. What made these law firms grow? They were slowly and steadily increasing their utilization rate. Over the course of 5 years, their average utilization rate went from 28% to 33%. That was it. That was the big difference between a growing law firm and a stable law firm. And so that led us to the idea of a law firm maturity model, a firm that is balancing both responsiveness and productivity to drive both results for their clients and results for the law firm. Now, importantly, this isn't a business model. This is more of an attitude. And why do I say that? Because all business models for law firms evolve over time. In fact, I'm going to be recommending several changes in this presentation that I hope you take and implement once you leave. So when we say the law firm maturity model, it's the balance that we're seeking, not a particular single way to practice law. Now in 2020, just like everything else, the legal industry was disrupted. But even then, the Legal Trends Report was incredibly valuable. We were able to do monthly reporting on the impact of lockdowns and the pandemic upon law firms. And what we immediately noticed was a huge drop in the creation of new matters in Clio and an incredibly large drop in revenue collected by law firms in early 2020. It was up to a 30% drop from where they were in the previous years. There were firms, however, that showed that they could weather this storm and in fact excel. And they were doing so because they were relying upon three features: online electronic payments, client portals, and client intake. And together, using these tools in 2019, they collected over $19,000 in additional revenue per lawyer on average. When we did this report in 2020, looking at these features, they were on track to gain almost $37,000 more per lawyer in average revenue. That was the power of these online tools in that moment. And clients recognized the power and convenience of these online tools. In 2018, we had asked clients, how important are online options in working with a law firm? And only 23% said that they were important. Fast forward to 2021, and 79% of clients were saying that online options, especially for communicating with their lawyer, were important. Those features that made the difference in 2020 were now table stakes in 2021. And importantly, they're not just table stakes for clients. What we reported last year in the 2022 Legal Trends Report is that since 2019, lawyers and non-lawyer legal professionals have left the office and they have never returned at the same rate that they've worked at before. From 2019, where lawyers were working about 40% of their time exclusively from the office, that's now dropped to 29%. And an even larger drop happened for non-lawyer legal professionals. The practice of law is now done online first. That's what the past Legal Trends reports have been teaching us. That, quite frankly, law firms aren't operating from a position of strength like we had assumed from past data. That there are ways to quantify the impact of changes, and that some of those changes are permanent. And that leads us to our 2023 Legal Trends Report. Now again, we're not going to cover everything. Download a copy of this because I'm scratching the surface. And the first place we're going to take a look is the state of the legal industry. We're going to look at four key things. Something new that we're calling the Legal Productivity Index. Our annual billable hour index. We're going to take a look at how hourly rates are comparing against inflation. And lastly, I'm going to look at those key performance indicators that we talked about before. Now, in the 2022 Legal Trends Report, we took a look at have law firms recovered from the pandemic and the lockdowns. And what we found is that law firms haven't just recovered, they've grown. They're growing at a faster pace than ever before. So we decided to expand that view. Let's take a look at all 8 years of Legal Trends data and see what does that tell us about law firms. And what we found is since 2016, the number of matters worked upon by timekeepers, so lawyers, paralegals, anyone that bills, right, has increased by 25%. The amount of billable hours that they're recording has increased by 35%. And the billed amounts and collected amounts for that same work has increased by nearly 3/4. You're working more on more matters, you're recording more, and you're getting paid a lot more for it. When we look at actual unadjusted dollars, right, what we're going to see is that law firms are now getting over 150% greater billed amounts and collected amounts per timekeeper. It's a gigantic jump, and you can actually see in 2020 where things really start to curve up. Part of the reason it's curved up is billable hours are higher. We now know that since 2016 that the average lawyer hourly rate is just under $330 an hour. That's an increase of 28% over the last 8 years. Non-lawyers are charging on average $178 per hour, an increase of only 19%. And when we blend those two rates together, we can see that the law firm rate is around $290 an hour, a change of only 22% since 2016. How has inflation been? Unfortunately, it's increased 29%, surpassing the law firm rate. And last year, we advised, as we saw inflation start to really climb in comparison to law firm rates, that your rates may be too low. We now know that it's the non-lawyer rates that are really dragging down law firm performance. If we take a look at 0%, which is just keeping up with inflation, we see that lawyers and non-lawyer and law firm rates were doing well. They were keeping above that 0% for a long time, but then struggled and dropped below that 0% line. They were falling behind the rate of inflation. We've since seen lawyer rates catch back up, but non-lawyer rates are 8% behind inflation, leaving the law firm rate at 5% behind inflation. We need to catch back up. Now, you can do that by increasing rates, but you can also do that by increasing your performance. And let's take a look at key performance indicators. We often shorthand this as KPIs. The KPIs are really simple. There are 3 of them. The first of which is utilization rate. In an 8-hour workday, which is the average, it's not every day or every week, but it is the average, how many of those hours are being spent on billable work? And what we've seen is significant improvement here. It's increased from 28% in 2016 to 37%. Realization rate has also improved. It's increased from 77% to 86%. Collection rate, unfortunately, is not growing as fast. This seems to be one that moves in smaller increments. And what we know is that collection rates had a high of 90% in 2021, but has since fallen, and we're forecasting that our 2023 numbers will be 89% as well. Now, we're not the only people reporting on this. Thomson Reuters reports on big law collection numbers, and they're actually projecting that collections for big law will drop in 2023, and it will be around 90%. So we're all consistent at least, but these numbers are the lawyer funnel. And so decreases at the top and decreases at every level will actually harm your law firm's fiscal performance. So remember, when we looked at 2016, I said you were only getting paid for about 18% of your day. Things have improved. Law firms, on average, are now getting paid for about 28% of their day. But that still leaves a lot of time that's being spent on necessary work, but not necessarily revenue-generating work. And that's why we're publishing, for the first time, a new metric, the metric of lockup. In this section, I'm going to tell you what lockup is, because it's probably not something you've heard before. We're going to publish, for the first time ever, benchmark for North American law firms and lockup based on Clio data. We're going to tell you why lockup matters, and then I'm going to show you that lockup can be improved. So what is lockup? Lockup is an accounting term which counts the number of days it takes to convert work in progress, unbilled work, and debtors, those bills that you've sent out, into cash. It's really the question that I ask, is your earned revenue in your bank account or in someone else's? And if it's in somebody else's, why? Where are the mistakes happening that drag out lockup for you? And it's important that we have this insight into the why, because lockup really talks about, do you have working capital and cash in hand, or are you scrambling each month and relying upon credit cards and a line of credit to keep your law firm going? There are three types of lockup measurements. There's realization lockup, collection lockup, and total lockup. And realization lockup measures inefficiency when it comes to a billing workflow. Remember I said there's statistics and math in this CLE. Realization lockup is actually a really simple math formula. And if you attend our workshop this afternoon, we'll tell you how to pull these numbers out of Clio. But it's work in progress, my unbilled time, divided by last year's collections, multiplied by 365. And we multiply it by 365 because it gives us a number of days comparable to our last year. So the median realization lockup for Clio using law firms is 38 days. Now, as Jack mentioned in his keynote earlier this morning, the top 25% is better. Their median lockup is around their average lockup is around 18 days. And there are firms that are a lot worse here. The bottom 25% of law firms in Clio have more than 78 days. That's 2.5 months of billed or recorded but unbilled time in their Clio accounts. Why aren't they giving that bill to the client? There are so many things that can happen between you recording that billable hour and getting the bill to the client. They might go out of business. There might be a severe economic shock. Their bank account might be emptied by fraud, right? The longer you wait to realize your unbilled time, the greater risk you're putting your law firm in. And that risk continues into collection lockup, which measures revenue locked up in clients' bank accounts. You've earned it, you've billed it, they haven't paid it. The math is roughly similar. We're going to take a look at our outstanding accounts receivable divided by last year's revenue, multiply it by 365. And the average, the median, I keep doing that, the median collection lockup for Clio using law firms is 45 days, so a month and a half. Better law firms are getting this down to 19 days. Worse law firms can actually go over 90 days, waiting 3 months for their clients to pay. Now, I once read an article that said lawyers are more than happy to bill a client an additional $2,000 rather than call them up and ask why they haven't paid the outstanding $20,000. It's true. Collections are no fun, but they're part of the business. Total lockup combines those two numbers. And so lets us know where inefficiencies in our billing workflow and inefficiencies in our collections workflow come together and how much of our annual revenue is locked up. For Clio using law firms, the median lockup is 97 days. That's 3.5 months. So now we have benchmarks. We know that the benchmarks for North American law firms, 38 days for realization, 97 days for total lockup. Are these numbers good or bad? Well, the first time you publish a metric, it's really hard to actually say. We just know that this is where we're at. But there was a source of data that we could turn to. The Law Society of England and Wales has published an annual financial benchmarking report for UK law firms for years. And one of the things that they do measure is lockup. So take a look at these numbers. And now I'm going to show you the median numbers for UK law firms. That's bad. Clio using law firms are actually getting their bills out about 2 months faster, and they're collecting revenue at nearly 2 months faster as well. And so what we're seeing is that there are law firms out there that are floating their clients for nearly 4 months more than law firms in Clio are. And that was gratifying to see that we seem to be performing well. But that doesn't mean that we can't be performing better and why we need to perform better. And that's why lockup matters. Now, law firms are lucky. We don't have to manage an inventory of products. We just have to keep printer paper around, right? But that doesn't mean we don't have expenses. The two biggest expenses reported for law firms are wages and a category that the Congressional Business Office in 2019 said is other. And that's things like insurance cost, labor costs that aren't employees, administrative expenses, and travel expenses. So Clio counts as at least one of those. No. And when you can't cover those, bad things happen. Stephen Davis, the chairman of the now infamous law firm, Dewey and LeBouf, said, if it's only money that holds a firm together, there's really no glue at all. And that was a pretty profound statement because this is actually a firm that collapsed. It was one of the biggest law firm collapses in US history. It once ranked 22 on the law firm AmLaw 100. They had over 1,000 lawyers. And when they collapsed, they had over $300 million in debt. And that meant that they couldn't pay their partners. And so their partners all left, and the law firm dissolved. If you think this is somewhat unique, it's unfortunately not. So Howie, which is another big law firm, had overexpansion, declining productivity, and quote unquote lax management of client billings. These were the reasons cited for Howie's troubles. In 2010, when they missed their budget projection by 35%, over 300 lawyers left, and that was just wave one, and the firm collapsed. And the country that I live in now, Canada, is not immune to this pressure as well. Here we have Heenan Blakely. They had 600 lawyers. They had offices in Europe and the United States. That's really rare for a Canadian law firm. And did just incredible work across a whole spectrum of practice areas. And yet, if you visit their website now, you're going to find a spam website because they failed to implement basic accounting protocols. It left them in debt. They couldn't cover their wages, their rent, their insurance payments. The bank called in their loans, and the firm dissolved in a matter of weeks. So managing lockup and making sure that your firm has working capital rather than working debt is a very important thing to manage as a successful small business. And we know from bank reporting in the United States that a lack of working capital is the most commonly cited reason for failure. So let's take a look at where lockup can make a difference. Let's take a look at a hypothetical law firm that bills $500,000 a year. Let's take a look at two, actually. One has a 100-day lockup. One has a 50-day total lockup. For the 100-day lockup firm, they're actually having nearly a quarter of their annual revenue, $137,000, locked up in an unbilled or uncollected state throughout their year. It's just inaccessible, and they've got to cover it some other way. Now, the 50-day lockup firm still has money locked up, but it's half of that other firm. This 50-day total lockup firm actually has an extra $69,000 in the bank throughout the year that they can use to cover wages, to pay for their liability insurance, to pay for their rent and their mortgage, to distribute as profits to partners. There's no end to the things that you can do with that cash if you have it in hand. But if you don't, you're going to be struggling. So how do we improve lockup? It turns out it's frighteningly easy. When we take a look at firms that aren't sending electric bills, so they're printing the bill out, they're licking the envelope and the stamp and putting it in the mail, versus firms that are using electric bills, there's actually a 6-day difference in total lockup. Does that seem like a huge number? No. But if we turn back to the UK, one of their largest law firms actually said that every day we reduce lockup actually puts $500,000 in the bank for us. If we can improve lockup by 10 days, we'd have an extra $5 million in the bank. Small changes in lockup actually create big changes in your working capital. And as we dug further into what's really improving lockup for law firms, we've got don't send electronic bills. In the middle, send bills by email. And in the far left, send bills via Clio for clients. And what we found is firms that were sending bills via Clio for clients actually had 12 fewer total lockup days. That's 12 fewer days where the money was moved from their bank account to yours. In that firm with $500,000 in annual revenue, that would free up an extra $16,000 throughout the year. Look at your monthly expenditures. Would an extra $16,000 help? That's the power of improving lockup. Small changes here, big changes in the sustainability of your law firm. And this doesn't even factor in the savings that you're going to have on envelopes, printer toner, postage, a paralegal to actually lick them all. All of those things are just gone if you can shift towards models that actually improve your lockup. And what we found is those same levers that improve lockup actually can improve a lot more of your performance as well. And so here I want to ask a somewhat rhetorical question. Can a firm consciously improve their performance, right? Then, what features are we able to identify in Clio that might fit that bill? And lastly, Clio payments as a performance enhancer. All of these are things in which you can do to evolve your law firm into a better state. So let's ask that first question. Can it be consciously improved? We have seen examples of firms that did not consciously improve themselves, and that's why they're now spam websites. But if you've been to any legal technology conference, you've probably seen this quote at some point. Has anybody not seen this quote? No hands. Yeah. What gets measured gets managed. It's a famous Peter Drucker quote. Unfortunately, this quote is a lie. He never said this. The Drucker Foundation, which has his library of papers, dug through it and said, this is about as close as we can get. Unless we determine what shall be measured and what the yardstick of measurement in an area will be, the area itself will not be seen. Thank God for editors. That's all I have to say. But the concept that's mentioned here, what gets measured gets managed, still applies. Until we actually look at our performance, we don't really know how we can get better. And lawyers are fretting about their performance. 41% of legal professionals are telling us that their clients don't pay on time. 24% of legal professionals are telling us that their clients don't pay at all. On the flip side, legal consumers, 84% of them, are saying they pay their bills timely. Where is this disconnect happening? What do we need to measure to improve this? Law firms know that they are, at least in part of the problem. 1 in 3 legal professionals agree that their firm takes too long to get bills out to clients. As we looked at the Thunberg curve of gratitude that Jack talked about in his keynote today, right? Timing of the bill does make a big difference. It also makes a big difference if you actually send a bill. 15% of clients, people who have hired a lawyer, told us that they never received a bill at all. Was it lost in the mail? Did they run out of printer toner? We don't know, but these clients are telling us that they didn't receive a bill at all. And 28% more tell us that when they did receive a bill, it took them a really long time. So it was either noticeably long or a very long time before they got their bill. And that's the downward slope of the gratitude curve, right? How important is it that I pay this bill if it wasn't important that my lawyer got it to me? So that's when we started to dig into Clio features, because we built a lot of features that are targeted at realization and collection. In fact, there are 11 features that I identified that are all about getting your bills out the door or collecting on those bills. And it's bill approval workflow, automated bill reminders, bulk billing, Clio for clients, email billing, evergreen trust request, outstanding balances, payment plans, secure payment links, stored payment methods, and trust request features. These are all in Clio today. So what we did was we looked at the usage of these features throughout 2022. And we looked at the rates of realization and collection that correlate to each of these. So the numbers that you're going to see aren't exactly the performance boost you're going to see. It's the difference we see between firms that do and don't, is probably the best way to describe it. But what did we see? We found that using these features correlates with both higher realization rates and collection rates. And I'm going to unpack what that means in just a second, but I'm going to show you how big a boost this can be. For realization rates, I worked these hours. I recorded these hours. I want to put these hours on a bill and send it to my client. Law firms that were using these features saw substantial increases in their realization rates. Well, correlated to substantial increases in their realization rates. My statisticians will get on me if I don't get that right. The 3 biggest ones, email bill sending, increased the realization rate from 73% to 91%. In outstanding balance, it correlated in an increase from 70% to 88%. And bulk billing, just grab all of my outstanding unbilled time and let's get it out the door. That correlated with an increase from 79% realization rate to 94% realization rate. We're getting closer to 100. And when you combine bulk billing with the trust request right next to it, that plus 12, that's actually a really powerful combination because Clio can record and apply the trust for multiple bills in one click. It's a feature there in Clio. And so I can take those hours that I've earned, get them on a bill, and get them out to my client both quick and record the transfer of funds for advanced fee payments directly into there. That's an example of why I think these features improve realization, even though some of them are based around collections. What does that mean? I think automated collections, the idea that Clio will email my client if the bill is late and I don't have to pick up the phone and call them, makes it easier for me to include those hours on the bill because I know I won't have to chase them down. I know that fee forward features where I'm getting advanced fee payments, say through trust requests. I'm getting notified when a trust balance is low through evergreen trust request features. Or my client has gone ahead and stored their own payment details in my Clio account securely, and I can just go ahead and click pay this bill. All of those give a law firm certainty that they're going to get paid so they don't write themselves down. And the last thing, and this is something that was really odd to us, is we included a feature called bill approval workflow. Does anybody use that feature? It's a feature that says my bookkeeper or my office manager or my legal secretary will generate all the bills, and then I, as the lawyer, will go through and approve them. And our expectation in reviewing the realization rate for that feature is that realization rate would drop. The more time you spend on reviewing each line item, we thought more likelihood that you would reduce the number of hours that end up on that bill. And we actually saw the opposite. It was a plus 7%. And I think that's telling us that there's some certainty around the value that lawyers are providing. You don't have to write yourself down, especially if they're going to cut the fees at the collection level anyway. But here's the happy thing. Using these features also uniformly led to a higher collection rate, except in one instance. So that's on the far right for you guys. Nope. Yeah, you're right. My left. And so the three big winners, right? Email sharing, as Jack mentioned in his keynote, it's 4%, 4-point bump. Outstanding balance report, a 3-point bump. Stored payment methods, which I mentioned just a moment ago, another 3-point, actually has a big bump as well. And why I think it's the new fee forward model. But with those three top features alone, that's basically a 5% raise by using these features. Would you use a new feature in Clio if it gave you a 5% raise? Would you use a feature you're already paying for right now to get a 5% raise? That's the question this slide is asking. And so firms that are using these features are both able to pass on more billable hours, they bill higher amounts, and they collect more of that billed amount. I cannot stress this enough. You are entering a win-win situation of client convenience when you use these features. So I want to give you an example. Firm A, Firm B, they both bill $100,000. Firm A uses email bill sharing. No stamps, no licking of envelopes. They actually realize more because email sharing correlates with an increase in realization rates. So they realize 91,000 of that 100,000. Firm B, that's licking and sticking, they only realize 73,000 on average. And Firm A, with a higher collection rate of 90%, will actually collect $81,000, nearly $82,000 in that 100,000 that they've billed, versus Firm B, which is walking away with 63,000. That's not a small sum, but they're doing the exact same work. They're billing the exact same amount. They're just transmitting those bills differently. And how you transmit can lead to conscious improvement. Now, there was one exception on the collection one. Did anybody read what that was? It was a drop of 2%. It was actually payment plans. And the reason it drops is payment plans takes an existing invoice and then stretches it out via installments. And so for a long time in Clio, that invoice looks like it's not paid, because it's not. There's still some outstanding invoices. But when we dug into the average collected amount correlated with using payment plans, we found something really interesting. On a monthly basis, firms that are using payment plans correlate to a 49% increase in monthly revenue. For solos, it correlated to a 71% increase in monthly revenue. The average lawyer in that cohort was pulling in about $15,000 extra a month. And I want to raise another number that is really interesting. The average payment installment in that data, and has been for the last 4 years, is just around $300. When we talk about access to justice and the crisis of the affordability of legal services, this is the number that I want you to take away. Because law firms that offer payment plans are having their clients pay $300 a month, something that hopefully is affordable to most families out there, and they're walking away with a higher collected amount of revenue. This is a win-win for you as a business owner and as a legal professional helping enforce the rule of law. $300. Walk away with that. Ask a client if they can afford $300 a month, and you will have a client. How are they going to pay that payment plan? Well, that's where we move to our last little bit of performance enhancement, and that's Clio payments. Clients are telling us that they want to be able to pay by credit card. It's the largest lump sum of clients here. And 38% of legal professionals are telling us that at least half of their law firm invoices now are being paid by credit card. And what happens to a law firm when they start issuing bills by credit card? They get paid 2 times as fast. Now, the median is 7 days versus 15 days. I issue a bill. If my clients can pay online, it'll take them only 7 days. We can actually break this down by a lot more detail. And the detail here is that the more I issue electronic bills, the faster my collections will be. If we look at the far left here, that little tiny blue bar on the farthest left, that's a firm that's issuing 75% of their bills or more using online payment options. There's a link that says pay here. They're able to collect 50% of their issued invoices in 3 days. Billing week is now 3 days. And as we move into a greater percentage of your billed amount, 60%, 70%, 80%, every time that firm that relies more heavily on electronic payments collects twice as fast. It's just a marked difference. And so the more you lean in, the more you automate, the faster your billing cycle will be. That's what the data is telling us. So you should be defaulting your clients towards this type of billing communication because it's timely, because it's convenient, because it reduces your lockup. All of these are things that can be enhanced by using this type of technology. So when I facetiously asked, can a law firm consciously improve their performance using technology? The answer is, of course, yes. It's just a question of which way do you want to do it now? And hopefully we've empowered you with choices on how to supercharge your law firm, whether it's reducing your lockup, whether it's increasing your key performance indicators, whether it's knowing that your non-lawyer legal professional rate is too low. All of these are things that you can now use technology to just quickly and easily enhance. Which leads us to our last topic, the next enhancement, applying artificial intelligence to the practice of law. Now we're going to do 2 quick sections here. First, what are our attitudes around artificial intelligence? And then lastly, actions. What should we be doing in the practice of law with artificial intelligence? When we ask lawyers and consumers, where do they think artificial intelligence will be impacting the practice of law, we know that they're interested. 63% of lawyers tell us that they want to learn more. Only 58% of legal professionals, though, are telling us that it isn't reliable yet, that I have concerns. The bottom one, that bottom green bar, 8% of lawyers just 8% of lawyers say that artificial intelligence tools are hard to learn how to use. Really jumps out at me because I have spent the last 11 years trying to teach lawyers technology, and I have run into some difficulty in teaching you guys. So the fact that AI is seeming easy to use is really encouraging to me because if it's easy, I know lawyers will use it. Consumers have some concerns, though, especially when it comes to the justice system. 46% of consumers are telling us that I would lose trust in courts if they used AI. Now, the sad news is AI is already being used in courts. And we do know that trust in courts is actually diminishing. This isn't going to help, is what this reads to me. But 32% of those same consumers are telling us that the benefits will outweigh the cost and that we can improve the justice system by using artificial intelligence. Where are the risks? What are people concerned about? Actually, I jumped ahead. What are the benefits that people are anticipating? Lawyers and consumers are telling us that they expect greater efficiency using the practice of law. Consumers are telling us that they expect better affordability in the practice of law and higher quality services. Now, there's that old axiom, you can get fast, cheap, or good, pick 2 out of 3. Consumers are telling us they want all 3 here. That's what we're seeing from this chart. And where are we all expressing concerns? Well, legal professionals especially are worried about ethical compliance. Consumers seem to be a little bit more worried about professional liability insurance. Will your insurance cover the mistakes made by AI? Client trust is about equally in the mix. And interesting, bigger law firms are telling us that they're worried about copyright as a specific issue. Over 1 in 3 clients, nope, wrong notes. But about any firm with 20 or more lawyers were more likely to express a concern about copyright than any other size law firm, which I found very interesting. Copyright is not my first concern when it comes to AI. Let's break down those first 3. Ethical compliance. So 20% of lawyers are telling us that they think a bar association will never, ever approve the use of AI tools. When we go into those bigger law firms, those with 20 or more, they're actually much more likely to say that they will never see a bar association approve AI tools. 31% of big law firms, or mid-sized firms, are telling us that no, never going to happen. This actually reminds me of some conversations that we had in Clio about 10 years ago, where people would say, cloud computing, my bar association will never let me do that, ever. That's where we're at right now with artificial intelligence, and I really found that interesting. I also want to highlight some happenings from the American Bar Association's mid-year annual. They actually announced a legal task force on the use of artificial intelligence in the practice of law. We fully expect to see some model ethics opinions start to emerge out of that. And so we will be reporting on that as it happens. And I will be speaking at the American Bar Association's tech show in February on ethics and AI. And we'll bring a lot of that information to bear there. So will bar associations approve it? Does it matter? Oh. If we look at cloud computing, the answer to both of those is yes, they'll approve it, and no, it doesn't matter. If we're technologically competent, that's going to be fine. Our insurers are a little bit of a different matter, so they are expressing some concern. So this is actually an article about a newsletter put out by Attorneys Liability Insurance Society Limited, a malpractice insurance company known by the unfortunate acronym of ALAS. ALAS, you're getting sued. What they wrote was that ChatGPT is, quote, not ready for prime time. Now, their vice president of loss prevention said in the newsletter, we're not saying no, never, but we are concerned that law firms can get carried away and forget that this technology is not a substitute for critical thinking. Now, this bit is not legal advice, but here's how I interpret that. You're probably not going to violate your professional liability insurance by using an AI tool. You are definitely going to violate your professional liability insurance agreement if you don't review the work and you submit it like that attorney who had the hallucinated citations. He's going to have problems with his liability insurer. And lastly is trust. Is there going to be trust in law firms that utilize artificial intelligence? That bottom blue bar, 70% of consumers are telling us that they should know if their lawyer is using AI. That top green bar, 12% of legal professionals think it will be easy for clients to figure that out. Now, as a lawyer that works in a company, I can tell you for a fact that Jack Newton does not know every piece of software that I use, right? And he actually pays the bills for them. So you'd think it'd be easy. But how many of your clients know what you use for legal research? What your accounting program is? Oh. What word processor are you using? Come on, I know there's a few WordPerfect people out there. No, they just don't know. And quite frankly, if the output is good, does it matter? Is the question that I'm asking again here. So yes, it's nice to disclose these things. Are we going to see ethics opinions that require you? I don't think so. We're going to have the odd judge that does, and that's a judge. You just can't fight with that. So the other interesting thing was we saw clients that were concerned about artificial intelligence in the justice system, but they do think that it could be a good tool for getting legal advice. 35%, so about a third of consumers said, yeah, I'd take legal advice from an AI. And given that they take medical advice from WebMD, legal advice from Google, this number doesn't really surprise me. But I do think we're going to see, as the quality of these answers potentially improves, a greater increase in this number, and more people turning to these services first to answer a question, and then coming to you when things go wrong. And 28% say that they would use AI to make a legal decision. Yikes, but you know, you can't really argue with a client sometimes. No. So where should we be using AI actions when practicing law? 51% of legal professionals say that they want to use AI in their practice. 32% of those legal professionals are telling us that they think it can reduce their workloads. But only 19% of legal professionals surveyed said that they are actively using artificial intelligence in some form in their law firm today. Less than 1 in 5. Is anybody here actually using any? Yeah, I see 1 in the back. I think maybe 2 over here. Joe, do you raise your hand? Oh, no, good, because you don't count. Yeah, that's Joe from Above the Law, everybody. Yeah. So where do clients and lawyers actually like to see AI? Where do they want it? Well, when we ask a whole host of different actions that lawyers take, such as drafting documents, calendaring, etc., this is where we saw responses of, I want AI there. Finding and storing documents was 51% of legal professionals. Getting documents signed was 49%. I've got like 8 people I need to sign this document. Get it out to them. And drafting documents was 45% of legal professionals. I think this would be really helpful here. We also saw that billing and payment tasks were seen as a great use for artificial intelligence as well, specifically tracking billable hours, collecting payments from clients, and tracking expenses. Calendaring was also on its own, and we just jumped ahead, but that was at 49%. 28% also want AI to help them respond to client emails, calls, and text. I actually think this is a good use for large language models. I do think, as we've cautioned with chatbots in the past, you need to have an off-ramp here for when the question gets too complex, that they can just say, hey, I need to talk to my lawyer now. That's a really good feature to build into these things. And some of our exhibitors, like LawDroid, have really good tools that actually have that built in. Where do clients think that artificial intelligence should be in the practice of law? The biggest amounts were 36% said that they should be tracking expenses, or you should be tracking expenses with it. You should be tracking billable hours, and it should help with your calendaring. Now, given that both sides, legal professionals and consumers, said we want it to be used for expenses and billable hours, is that compatible? I don't think so, because clients are telling us that they would be comfortable with their lawyer using artificial intelligence if, on that third bar down, it makes services more affordable. So we all want artificial intelligence to track all of our time and record more time, right? We wanted to make sure that that email receipt ends up on my client's invoice. Clients are telling us the exact opposite. If you're using artificial intelligence, that should result in less time on the bill, less expenses on my invoice. So there's this push-pull that I think is going to be happening when it comes to using these tools in the practice of law. And that's why when we asked that 19%, where are you actively using artificial intelligence right now? The two biggest categories were legal research with 9% of legal professionals, just 9%, and drafting documents, which is 7%. We're just at the beginning of artificial intelligence. We're still trying to figure out where it fits and for whom it benefits, but it's actively in law firms out there right now. And that's why I think we collectively need to figure out how we're going to be approaching this. So we're almost at the end, thank you. There are some takeaways that I want you to have from today's presentation. The first of which, that law firms are improving. The historical data that Clio publishes in the Legal Trends Report shows that law firms are improving over time. We're collectively getting better. Our productivity, our KPIs, even our hourly rates are keeping pace with inflation and showing improvement. We're getting better, guys. But there's still room to grow, right? There's a large opportunity to improve further. Now, whether that's increasing your non-lawyer rates to match inflation, increasing your KPIs to better realize and collect upon your fees, reducing lockup, or using Clio payments to address billing and collection dysfunction, there are opportunities to improve. And the Legal Trends Report keeps quantifying how good these things can be if you lean into them. And lastly, start planning to integrate AI into your practice now. Those of you attending here in Nashville, please swing by the product lab, test out Clio Duo, give us feedback on its answers, its utility, its use cases, because we design these things with you in mind, and so having your feedback is crucial. What are some next steps that you can take today? First, we haven't covered everything. There's a lot more data in the Legal Trends Report. So please swing by clio.com/LTR to download a copy today. Read it, reach out to me, ask questions. We can make this make sense. And for those of you attending here today in Nashville, we have a workshop at 2:45 in the Governor's Ballroom B. It's out the door to the right, where my colleague Aaron Walker and I we'll be taking a look at these benchmark numbers that I've been spouting for the last hour, and we'll tell you how to start using those in your Clio accounts and in your practice to get the improvements that we've been talking about. So I really hope to see you there. This has been the 2023 Legal Trends Report. Thank you for joining me. I'm Joshua Lenon. This is my email address, and I look forward to chatting with you throughout the conference and throughout the year until our next Legal Trends Report. We have, thanks. We have 2 minutes. So are there any questions from here in the audience or from our virtual attendees? Hallie, I think you have a question.
I have a virtual question from Tamara Harper. I like the graph subreports in the firm dashboard so I can search unbillable. What is untracked in utilization, and how do we determine where this number is coming from and how to look in depth at it?
Okay, in Clio Manage, there is the firm dashboard. And there are two views of that. There's the personal dashboard, where you can set billable hour targets, and then there's the firm dashboard, which does a year-over-year utilization review. And so if you're new to Clio, the firm dashboard won't necessarily have as much information as firms that's been using it for several years, but that's the place to look for your utilization rate. Now, if you need to calculate your own because you're new to Clio, take the number of work hours in a week, that's 40 hours, and divide it by the total number of billable hours you've recorded for that week. And that will tell you your weekly utilization rate. Your personal dashboard can then be based around that target. If I want to get more than 2 hours a day, set the target there, and Clio will help keep you on track for it.
Thank you.
Yep, any other questions? All right, this is where I publicly apologize to Joe now, because I was just teasing. You matter. Thank you, everybody. I look forward to seeing you at the rest of the conference.
Question here?
Oh, I'm sorry? Was
Yeah,
that?
I did have one question.
Yeah, can we get it on the mic? Yeah.
Yeah, so the realization rate, is there any way to separate flat fee billing where it shows up as unbillable time from actual billed time to get a more accurate picture?
So currently it's only based on hourly rate data, but there is a way around that. You can actually track non-billed and unbilled time in Clio. So you can set a 0 rate and track that, or you can have your normal hourly rate, but in the little billing modal that pops up where you like enter the details and all that, you can click it to don't bill, don't show on the bill. There are two options there. And that'll actually help improve your tracking of your utilization rate because you'll see those hours recorded even though they're not showing up technically on the client's bill. Does that help?
Yes.
Okay. All right. Thank you so much, everybody. And I want to thank our tech crew that's, quite frankly, worked a lot with me to make sure that this presentation was amazing. So thank you, Omar. Thank you, guys. Oh.